Check, check. Awesome. All right, the hurdles of releasing and maintaining a mobile application. And to be honest, this was not the title that I wanted to use. I wanted to use this title, but I got some remarks from marketing that this was not the best one. It was too long, but basically it comes back to the words that were highlighted. Basically, hurdle, problem, or difficulties that must be overcome. Releasing, basically moving a mobile application freely to the phones of your end users. And also maintaining, giving us the necessities to keep this app running and also be able to release it. And this is a lot of information, and what I just wanted to do today with you is I wanted to think about what you need to do when you're going to release a mobile application. And I want you to imagine kind of like a situation that you want to build your own app. And to be able to build your own or hybrid or native application, you need to start with an idea. But in the end, yeah, what should I build? And I don't know if we have a lot of pet lovers here. I love dogs. And when I imagine that I need to do something, but I don't have the inspiration, I'm looking at my dog. I don't have a dog, just imagine it. Looking at my dog, and I see him like, oh. And that will give us the idea. If we look at the dog, it will give us the idea what we want to do. We want to build a new social media platform. We call it Bark Insta. And we're going to create that social media platform for people who love dogs and who love to share images and videos of their lazy dogs or just funny pictures. So we're going to use that idea and we're going to build our application. And what I want to do with this is I want to walk through all the things that you need to do if you want to release your application to production, but also if you want to release your mobile application to the app stores and also be able to do updates. So let's start. I think everybody here in the room is a master Yoda in JavaScript, TypeScript, HTML, CSS. But yeah, to develop an application, you need to have some iOS skills maybe, or Android skills. You need to learn a new language, Objective-C or Swift for iOS, or you need to learn Java. We already know how painful that is. We need to learn Java or Kotlin. But have no fear. JavaScript with React Native, NativeScript, and Ionic are here. So we have the tools now to build that application. We have the tools, we've got the knowledge, and we have the tools. But what should we do now? Well, first thing that I would normally do is basically just grab a cup of coffee, open my laptop, preferably a Mac. And I have nothing against a Windows machine, but if you want to develop something for iOS, you just need to have a Mac. So we want to start with coffee, waking up, opening our laptop, and start. So we open our favorite editor. 9 out of 10 times, this will be the one, because it supports JavaScript or TypeScript beautifully. So we use this. We want to use our editor. Now, what we need to do is we need to select the framework that you would love to work with. And if you're a React developer, I think you might love working with React Native. If you've played with it, you might also not love it, but you might want to go, for example, to Ionic. Also a really cool tool. But what you're going to do is you're going to read the documentation. Based on the documentation, you see that you need to have some extra tools on your machine. For iOS, you need to have, for example, Xcode. You can just download it, no issues, and the advantage if you're downloading Xcode on your Mac machine is that you will get iOS simulators. So you can start developing your iOS application already, and you can start developing and seeing what you're doing. For Android, you don't need to have a real editor, but you can use something which is called Android Studio. And when you download Android Studio, you get the option to create your own emulators, Android emulators, all types of Android versions. So basically, we're now set. There are no real big hurdles here for starting to develop. So what we're going to do now is we're just going to grab that cup of coffee again, and we're going to drink and code. That's the only thing that we need to do now. So again, no real big hurdles. But depending the type of framework that you selected, you might have a challenge. How do you need to create this component? Or how do you want to interact with the native components on your phone? So the only thing you need to do here is use your best friend, which 9 out of 10 times is Google. Some people call it Stack Overflow, but Google is your main point of entrance. And when you're busy developing your application, you're like, this is going to be awesome. Really, we're going to develop an application for dogs, well, dog lovers. And you can already imagine all the pictures that you can see, mind the GDPR, but all the pictures that you could see from all the other users. So you're busy and you created your first screens. Like I said, Instabark or Bark Insta, it's kind of like a clone of Instagram, but we already have an idea about what we want to do. So if you look at this, are there any hurdles? No. I think this is pretty easy. You already had the option to test your application manually on an iOS simulator. You had the option to test this on an Android emulator. Pretty easy, but you don't want to do this all the time manually. And second of all, you love Android or you love iOS, you've got your physical phone. So you also want to test it on a real phone. What do you do then? Well, first thing that you do is you figure out that you cannot push it to a real phone on Android. You need to go to the documentation, need to do something with signing, but when you fix this, when you've got your key set up, you're able to push your Android application to your Android phone. Pretty easy, no hurdle. Apple, all right, now it comes. No, just kidding. When you start with Apple, the first thing you need to do is, you just need to use your credit card. It's the first thing that we need to do with Apple. And the reason for that, it's pretty closed system. And if you want to push something to your phone, you need to be allowed to push it to your phone. And just in a nutshell, you need to have a membership. And that membership tells you that you're part of the club, that you can push it to an iPad or that you can push it to an iPhone. There are 2 types of memberships. If you don't want to pay a lot, you can even get a free one, but then you cannot push to the stores because you also need a membership to push it to the store. So we go to the website of Apple and we see we got a default membership. It will cost you $99, but then you have the option to push your application to your own phone, but also in the end to the App Store. And also imagine that even though you're now developing this application, you're already having fun with it, you also want to earn some money with it. So you really need to have this certificate to also get some money back from Apple. They will still take 30%, but you can get some money back. There's one thing that you need to be aware of if you're starting with the developer certificate, is that there's a limitation of the amount of friends that you can invite to push the application to their phones, especially iOS phones. You can only push it to 99 different phones. That's one limitation, and how it works, that's basically a unique identifier packaged in the app, telling the app you are allowed to install on this phone or on that phone. Otherwise, you cannot do anything. If you want to do it a little bit easier, then Apple can also make it easier for you, as long as you pay. You need to pay $299, and then you will get the enterprise certificate. Enterprise certificate will help you because the certificate for installing it on the phone is already in the app. You can create your own in-house, non-commercial app store. This is being done by a lot of customers, end users, or not end users, but customers that want to start, for example, their internal apps, or they want to do some beta testing. But again, the only hurdle you have here is that you lose some money. Hopefully you will earn some money, but well, not too big. Then we want to build it. And depending on which framework you selected, you need to have a really powerful machine. At least, hopefully, you would have a Mac and then an M1, because then you don't have the opportunity, or basically if you would have an old Mac, you can boil an egg on your machine when you're building your application. When you have an M1, it will be faster and it will be cooler also in your room. But if you would compare this, and now look at the experience that you have. You're a front-end developer. You're used to developing applications. You're used to building your applications. If you compare this with native applications or hybrid applications, then you're like, oh my God, it's so slow. This could be a hurdle, especially if you do multiple, or if you need to do multiple releases. But, well, something we can overcome, I think, or something we can think of later on, because yeah, this is our first app. Will it be a success? You'll never know. But you've been doing some coding, you're like, okay, I need a break. So most people like me are lazy. I'm going to walk my dog and think about new ideas about what I can do. And when I'm walking the dog, I'm like, the line is not long enough. I need to test something. I need to test also my application. So you get back behind your laptop and thinking about testing. What should I do? And there's a saying, I think it's drinking from the fire hose. If you're looking at testing, there's so many things that you could do. And based on what your experience is, you can already start with unit testing. Pretty easy. But the application will be in the hands of your end users. So you also need to do some UI testing. This can be a tricky part. But depending on the framework that you're using, if you're, for example, using React Native, you can use a UI library which is called Detox. Really awesome. It has a lot of pros, but also some cons. Just check it out if you're doing React Native. Really cool. Or you could use something which is called Appium. And Appium can be seen as Selenium, basically just testing it from the outside as an end user. And just a shameless plug, if you want to know more about Appium, last, March, when we did the online also for JSWORLD, I gave a presentation about bringing Ionic end-to-end testing to a higher level. Ionic also has a boilerplate now for you. If you're developing, they can help you with that boilerplate to do some testing on emulators, simulators, or even on real devices. Be aware, get that certificate from Apple and lose some money, or earn some money. But when you're running your test cases, and compare that to what you're used to, and especially your UI test cases, you're like, oh my God, this is so slow. So if you now think about your release process, you're like, okay, if I compare this with the web, I might need to make some drastic decisions here. So I'm just going to remove a few of those UI test cases. I'm just going to do the most important things, test it on the emulators, simulators, maybe on a real device, but just let's do that. And when you're done, when you're confident, you're relaxed. You can basically push your application to the store. And I intentionally called this dog Karma, because maybe Karma will hit us. You'll never know, but okay. We want to release our application to the store now. We start with Android. Android would be the easiest one. But for Android, we also need to use our credit card. If we want to be able to push it to the stores, we need to pay 25 bucks. Well, that's doable. 25, if I have a lot of users, I might be able to earn this back in a few hours. But when you're then looking into the iOS or the Apple App Store and then the Android App Store, the Play Store, you're like, what? A review? Do I need to wait also for a review? I'm used to push something to production. I'm not waiting. No, you need to wait. If we're talking about iOS or if we're talking about Android, you need to be aware of the fact that they need to verify if your application is good. They basically just need to see if they can also earn some money with it. It will cost them between 1 and 7 days. 7 is really, really, really long time, waiting for a week for it to be pushed to production, but it can take up to 7 days, especially when you're one of the lucky persons that you'll get an extensive review, especially with Android. But, okay, let's just accept this. Let's just accept that we need to wait. So I pushed everything to the app stores and I'm waiting for my review. 3 days later, I'm like, what? What happened? My app got rejected. I made a mistake because I forgot to provide credentials. Yeah, you need to log in. Those stores and those reviews need to have those credentials. So let's just resubmit it and don't forget to pass your credentials for the review. And when you've done that, you get an email. Together, it took 5 days to get this email. Yes, you can now push your application to production. You can push it to the stores. You can start earning some money with your application. But when you're doing that, you realize, what? Do I now also need to wait 1 to 24 hours before the application is in the stores? I already needed to wait 1 to 7 days for my app. In this case, it took me 5 days. And when I'm lucky, my application will be, or my update will be there in the stores in 24 hours. And then when you think about this, realize, okay, was my initial release. Will this be the same for every release I'm going to do? Yes, it will be the same for every release. Maybe not the 7 days, but it will not be in production instantly like you're used to when you're developing and publishing your web application. But in the end, you're enjoying everything. And like I said, you're not allowed to look at all the images with GDPR here in Europe, but you're just enjoying everything. It's kind of like a masterpiece. But in the end, you get your first review. And you're like, yes, a review from Apple. Well, not Apple, someone who's using an iOS phone. And you look at the review and you're like, yes, I got 1 out of 5 stars. My God, 1 star for my app. What happened? And sorry for not zooming in, but people with really good classes, yeah, okay, it's crashing. The application is crashing after registering. And you're like, okay, what happened here? What happened with that application? What happened on the phone? What should I do? And you feel a little bit depressed. You're like, God, my God, why is it so hard? I created an awesome application. I just want to enjoy. I want to build new features. But now I need to fix something, and I don't know how to fix this. So I'm now, well, not seeing everybody, but I see a few people here. Why this story? Why are we looking at this? Why? Well, I just wanted to explain to you the pain points, the things that could happen if you would compare this with your normal day job. I'm not saying that developing a native application or hybrid application is not a normal day job, but I wanted to compare this with what your experience is with web applications. And if you would look into the steps that we're taking, this also looks a little bit like the software development lifecycle. So what I wanted to do to emphasize basically the biggest hurdles here, or the pain points, or whatever you want to call them, what I wanted to do is to compare basically, use the software development lifecycle that we have, because we were planning, we were coding, we were building the application on our machine. Maybe we need to think about something else, not only our local machine, but maybe something in the cloud. We want to test it, we need to deploy it also to the stores, and we need to get the feedback. So if we would compare this for web applications and also for hybrid/native applications, then yeah, let's just do that. Let's just compare it. If we do planning and coding for web and hybrid native, I think this is not, you've already seen, this is not a big challenge. There are no big issues here. There might be some issues, but use Google and you can figure that one out. If you then look at building, then you would see that building your web application 9 out of 10 times is pretty fast. It can be slow, but then you might be doing the wrong things. There are a lot of talks out there on YouTube from different conferences to see how you can also improve this. If you're waiting for your build to be finished in 3 hours, then you really need to watch those talks. If you then compare this with hybrid or native applications, then you would see that it can be slow. Normally they say for Android, if you have a simple application, it can be 5 minutes, but if you look at iOS, depending on your machine, if you're using React Native, it can take even longer, but between 10 and 15 minutes for iOS, for a simple application. Depending on the amount of modules that you have, it could take longer. Testing, UI testing, pretty fast for web. Keep in the back of your mind that it will be 2 to 6 times, 2 to 6 times slower when we're doing this on emulators, simulators, or on real devices. So this could already be something that we need to keep in the back of our mind. And then when we do deploying, like I mentioned with the web, it's daily, you could do it hourly, you can do it per minute. I don't know how many people do it per minute here, and I mean deploying, but no one? Okay, well, you can do that. There are some cool companies doing that, but you can do it really, really fast. And if there's something wrong in production, you can just create a fix, push it to production, and if your fix breaks something else, then roll it back. Easy peasy, 9 out of 10 times. If you would look at native applications, like I mentioned, you've got your review time, you've got your release time. So this could take up between 1 and, if you're really unlucky, 1 to 8 days, with also the release of the app to the stores. And then if we look at operating and getting the feedback back from production when there's an issue with your web application, it's pretty easy for you to see what's happening. You can replicate this. You can just spin up a new machine. You can use the cloud. You can use Sauce Labs, for example, to run it on different browsers. Pretty easy to debug this and see what's happening for your customers. But if you're looking at native applications, then this is really hard. Why is it hard? Because of a few reasons. If we're talking about mobile, first thing is that we could have 20 different versions out there on phones of our end users, and especially if we do not implement a proper way to do some version management on your phone, on your app. You cannot roll back an application that has been installed on the phone of a customer. If you could do that, then you could do even more, and we're not allowed to do that. So this is one of the things that's really important to understand. If we're going to deliver a native application or a hybrid application to the stores, you cannot revert. So think about that version management system in your own application. Secondly, it's remote by default, meaning when an issue is happening, it's always happening on the phone of a user in his hand. You do not know the circumstances. 9 of 10 times, you do not know the circumstances. You do not know the OS version. You do not know the screen size. Basically, you know you know nothing. So trying to debug this only with an error line like crash or fatal error whatsoever, it's not useful. And last but not least, for browsers, we're lucky at the moment. Previously, we had IE6, we had IE11. Now we have Safari, but we're basically lucky with the browsers. If you look at the mobile devices, then for iOS also, we're a little bit lucky there because we've got a small market there, small amount of devices. And also, most iOS users are updating their system more frequently than the Android developer, or the Android users, sorry. But if you look at Android, we have tons of different devices, screen sizes, OS versions, all things, problems, challenges that could influence your application, that could influence also how your end user, is using your application and experiencing your application. And we were talking about that dog application, but now imagine that you need to do this for the customer that you're working for. This is an application that should, for example, for the Netherlands, this is the bol.com application or the Amazon application. You need to earn money with it. If you screw up in this process, if you don't have the right information, you cannot really fix something really fast. So if you go back to this software development lifecycle and we zoom in a little bit more into those hurdles, those pain points, then this is the first one we need to be aware of. If we want to release something really quickly, we're basically already limited here. We cannot roll back. If you did not implement a rollback system, or at least a blocking system, but you cannot roll back. You cannot fix something really fast in production. It will just take time, and that time will annoy your customers because you might have a breaking application. This is also really, really painful. If you do not focus on getting the right feedback from the devices, what is happening, maybe even a video that you could see what your customer was doing. Maybe, I don't know if you ever heard of the fat finger test. My finger might be bigger than fingers of my daughters, for example. I could touch different buttons. My daughters might just touch the right button. So if you know what happened, if you know what your customer was doing, it could help you replicate what was causing that issue. And then last but not least, please do not forget to test properly. Do not only test, for example, if you're doing a hybrid application, do not only test the web content. Your user, for example, is using his fingers. He's not using JavaScript executors to scroll something into the view. No, we're all swiping through our applications. Test that manually or automated. Use the right tools for this. And then last but not least, in all three parts of this process, the debugging information is really, really important. If you already have a right debugger in your test build, you might be able to retrieve information that could be valuable for you before you release it to the stores. Because if you see that only in production, then yeah, you have an issue and you need to re-release it. It will cost you a few extra days. If you already start doing the debugging with testing, then it will save your life, but also the life of your customers. So hopefully you now have an idea about the things that you need to be aware of when you want to start developing your application or when you want to release your application to production. I forgot to show the most important slide. It's basically this slide, and we can go to the next slide in a few seconds. If you just want to know more about me, I'm Wim, I work at SaaS Labs. If you also want to know more about testing, about automation strategies, about debugging, about, well, basically everything you want to know about mobile devices and quality, you can go to our booth. It's, if we open the doors in a few minutes, we're there at the stand. If you want to know more, please visit us. And for now, I just want to say thank you also from the dogs. Thank you for listening to me, and hopefully this is useful for you.
Thank you, Wim. That was a wonderful talk.